Hello everyone. Before we dive into this incredible story, I want to know where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below. And if you're ready for a story that will completely change how you see people around you, hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. Trust me, what you're about to hear will make you think twice before judging anyone by their appearance. This is the true story of Mary Johnson and how 30 minutes changed everything. The 28th floor of the Davis & Associates building in downtown Chicago hummed with the controlled chaos of corporate America. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of Lake Michigan, while mahogany conference tables and Italian leather chairs spoke of success and power. But none of this grandeur touched Mary Johnson as she pushed her cleaning cart down the marble-lined corridor. At 43, Mary had perfected the art of invisibility. Her brown hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, her blue uniform bearing the logo of Clean Solutions, Inc. She moved through the corporate world like a ghost, dusting executives' desks, emptying trash cans filled with million-dollar decisions, and cleaning windows that reflected dreams she had long ago abandoned. "Make sure you're done with the conference room by 3, Jennifer," John Davis's secretary said, without looking up from her computer. "We have the German investors coming in." Mary nodded silently, as she always did. Jennifer had worked there for 10 years, but had never once asked Mary her last name or where she was from. To the executives of Davis & Associates, Mary was simply the cleaning lady. Efficient, quiet, and entirely forgettable. As Mary began polishing the conference table, she heard raised voices coming from the corner office. John Davis, the company's founder and CEO, was pacing frantically behind his desk, his usual composure shattered. 23 minutes, Jennifer. They'll be here in 23 minutes, and our translator just got hospitalized." Davis's voice carried a desperation Mary had never heard before in her 2 years of working in the building. She paused in her cleaning, something stirring deep in her chest. The word German hung in the air like a trigger, awakening memories she had spent 4 years trying to bury. Munich, BMW, the life she had lost when everything fell apart. "Sir, I've called everyone in the city." Jennifer's voice was tight with panic. "Every professional translator is either booked or can't make it in time." Mary's hand tightened on her cleaning cloth. Through the open door, she could see John Davis running his hands through his grey hair, the weight of his entire company's future pressing down on his shoulders. This was the moment that would define Davis & Associates' expansion into European markets, a $500 million deal that had taken 2 years to arrange. For a split second, Mary saw herself walking past, continuing her invisible routine, letting these people solve their own problems. After all, what did their corporate world have to do with her anymore? She was just the cleaning lady. But then John Davis spoke again, his voice breaking. "If we lose this contract, I'll have to lay off half the company, all those families. God help me. What am I going to do?" Mary took a deep breath, her heart pounding as she approached the office door. Every instinct told her to remain invisible, to stay safe in her anonymity. But something stronger, perhaps the memory of who she used to be, or maybe simple human compassion, pushed her forward. She knocked gently on the doorframe. All heads turned toward her. John Davis, Jennifer, Richard the CFO, and Patricia from marketing. Their expressions ranged from annoyance to outright dismissal. To them, she was an interruption at the worst possible moment. "Mary, not now," Jennifer said with barely concealed irritation. "We're in the middle of a crisis." Mary stepped into the office, feeling the weight of their collective judgment. Her uniform felt heavier, her position more precarious, but she had crossed a line now, and there was no going back. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said quietly, her voice steadier than she felt. "But I couldn't help overhearing your situation with the German investors." John Davis looked at her with barely controlled impatience. "Mary, I appreciate your concern, but unless you know a professional German translator who can be here in 20 minutes, Mary met his eyes directly for the first time in 2 years of working in his building. "Actually, sir, I do know someone who speaks fluent German." The room fell silent. "You do?" Davis's voice carried a desperate hope. "Who?" "Can you call them right now?" Mary's voice was barely above a whisper, but in the silence of that office it carried with absolute clarity, "Me." The silence that followed was deafening. 4 sets of eyes stared at her as if she had suddenly sprouted wings. The invisible cleaning lady had just claimed to speak fluent German, and nobody knew quite how to process this impossible revelation. But outside the windows of the 28th floor, a black Mercedes was pulling up to the building, carrying the most important investors in Davis & Associates history. 12 years earlier, Munich, Germany. The BMW headquarters in Munich gleamed under the autumn sun as Mary Christine Hartwell, then 31 years old, strode through the executive parking garage in her tailored Armani suit. Her heels clicked confidently against the polished concrete as she made her way to the elevator that would take her to the 15th floor, where her corner office overlooked the entire city. "Guten Morgen, Mrs. Hartwell," her assistant Klaus greeted her in perfect German. "The Americans from Detroit are waiting in conference room A." Mary nodded, switching effortlessly between her native English and the German that had become second nature to her after 8 years in Munich. As director of North American operations for BMW Group, she oversaw a billion-dollar portfolio and managed relationships with dealerships from Vancouver to Mexico City. The conference room was filled with automotive executives, all men in expensive suits, who initially questioned whether this young American woman truly understood the intricacies of international automotive markets. But within 30 minutes of her presentation, delivered flawlessly in German with occasional translations to English, their skepticism had transformed into respectful attention. "Your market analysis for the Midwest region is exceptional," remarked Dr. Muller, BMW's head of international sales. "How did you identify the demographic shift toward luxury SUVs 3 quarters before our German analysts?" Mary smiled, the confidence that came from expertise and hard work evident in her posture. "I spent 2 months driving through Illinois, Michigan, and Ohio, talking directly to dealers and customers. Sometimes the best market research happens outside the boardroom." That evening, Mary returned to her penthouse apartment in Schwabing, Munich's most prestigious district. Her husband Robert was waiting with champagne. He always celebrated her victories as if they were his own. Their son Michael, then 7 years old, ran to hug her, chattering excitedly in the German-English mixture that had become their family language. "Mama, did you make another €1,000,000 today?" Michael asked with the innocent directness of childhood. "Something like that, Liebling," Mary laughed, ruffling his hair. Life was perfect. She had built a career that mattered, a family she adored, and a future that seemed limitless. But perfection, as Mary would learn, is often just the calm before the storm. The first warning sign came 18 months later, when Robert's accounting firm began handling increasingly complex international transactions. Mary was too busy with her own career to pay close attention to her husband's business, trusting him completely. After all, he was the financial expert in the family. "We're moving money through Switzerland for tax optimization," Robert explained when Mary asked about the unusual banking arrangements. "Completely legal, just efficient." Mary accepted his explanation. She was an automotive executive, not a financial analyst. And Robert had always handled their money brilliantly. Their investment portfolio was worth over €3 million. Their lifestyle was enviable, and Michael attended the best international school in Munich. The second warning sign came when Robert insisted on putting all their assets in his name for tax purposes. Mary signed the documents without question, her signature sealing her fate, though she couldn't know it at the time. The third and final warning came at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, when German federal police knocked on their apartment door with a warrant for Robert's arrest. As Mary watched her husband being handcuffed in their marble foyer, she realized that the life she had built so carefully was about to collapse entirely. "Tax evasion, money laundering, and fraud," the lead investigator explained to Mary in German. "Your husband has been operating an illegal offshore scheme for the past 3 years. All assets connected to these activities will be frozen pending investigation." Within 48 hours, Mary lost everything: her savings, her house, her investments, and worst of all, her job. BMW couldn't retain an executive whose personal life had become a criminal investigation, regardless of her innocence. The scandal made headlines in German business newspapers, and Mary Christine Hartwell became persona non grata in Munich's corporate circles. With Michael clinging to her side, speaking German through his tears, Mary realized she had a terrible choice to make: stay in Germany and fight a legal system she couldn't afford to navigate, or return to America and start over with nothing. She chose America, choosing her son's future over her own pride. But as their plane lifted off from Munich International Airport, Mary looked down at the city, where she had been somebody important, somebody respected, somebody with a voice that mattered. Now she was just another single mother, heading home with empty pockets and a heart full of regrets. The transformation from Mary Christine Hartwell, BMW executive, to Mary Johnson, cleaning lady, would prove to be more devastating than she ever imagined. Chicago, 4 years ago. O'Hare International Airport buzzed with travelers, but Mary felt completely alone as she walked through the terminal with 15-year-old Michael beside her. Their entire life fit into 3 suitcases, a dramatic reduction from the luxury they had left behind in Munich. Michael hadn't spoken since the plane took off, his eyes red from crying as he processed the magnitude of what they had lost. "Mom, where are we going to live?" Michael finally asked in English, though his German accent still colored every word. Mary pulled their meager luggage toward the taxi line, her heart breaking at the lost look in her son's eyes. "We'll figure it out, baby. We'll figure it out together." Her sister Janet lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment in Pilsen, a working-class Chicago neighborhood that was a world away from the executive lifestyle Mary had known. Janet, a single mother herself working 2 jobs to support her own daughter, welcomed them with open arms, but limited space. "You can stay as long as you need," Janet said, clearing out her daughter's room so Michael could have somewhere to sleep. "But Mary, you need to understand, Chicago isn't Munich. Without your German credentials, without references from BMW, you're starting from zero." Starting from zero proved to be optimistic. Mary spent the first 6 months sending out resumes, calling headhunters and attending interviews. But every conversation followed the same devastating pattern. "Your BMW experience is impressive, Ms. Johnson, but there's a gap in your employment history. We see here that your last position ended due to circumstances beyond your control. Can you elaborate? We'd need to verify your employment history directly with BMW Munich, and given the situation, that might be problematic." The whispered scandal followed her across the Atlantic. In the small world of international automotive executives, everyone knew about Robert Hartwell's arrest and his wife's spectacular fall from grace. Whether Mary had been involved or not was irrelevant. The stigma was permanent. Month by month, Mary's expectations lowered. Executive positions became management roles became administrative jobs became anything that would pay the bills. But even entry-level corporate positions required background checks that inevitably led back to the BMW scandal. "I'm sorry, Ms. Johnson," became the most common phrase in her vocabulary. By her 8th month in Chicago, Mary was facing a brutal reality. She had a master's degree in international business from Northwestern University, 8 years of executive experience managing billion-dollar operations, and spoke 4 languages fluently. Yet she couldn't get hired to answer phones at a car dealership. The breaking point came when Michael started his junior year at Chicago's public school system. The academic rigor was far below what he had experienced at Munich International School, and the cultural adjustment was devastating for a teenager who had spent most of his life in Europe. "I hate it here," Michael told her one evening as they shared a dinner of canned soup and bread. "I hate this apartment, I hate this school, I hate not having any money. Why can't we just go back home?" "This is home now," Mary said quietly, though the words felt like lies in her mouth. "No, it's not." Michael slammed his spoon down. "Home was our apartment in Schwabing. Home was where I could walk to school and speak German with my friends, and where you were somebody important instead of... He didn't finish the sentence, but Mary heard the unspoken words, "instead of nobody." That night, Mary sat in Janet's living room with the classified ads spread before her, circling every job listing she was qualified for. The list had grown progressively smaller and more desperate over the months. Executive assistant positions had become receptionist roles, which had become retail clerk jobs, which had become... Her eyes stopped on a small advertisement in the corner. "Clean Solutions Inc. seeks reliable cleaning staff for downtown office buildings. Evening hours, no experience necessary. Apply in person." Mary stared at that ad for a long time. 8 years ago, she had sat in BMW board meetings deciding the fate of automotive markets across North America. Now she was considering a job emptying trash cans and mopping floors. But Michael needed clothes for school. The rent was due in 2 weeks, and Janet's patient generosity couldn't last forever. The next morning, Mary Johnson, she had legally changed her name to escape the Hartwell scandal, walked into the Clean Solutions office on State Street. The manager, a harried woman named Rosa, looked her over briefly. "You ever cleaned offices before?" "No, ma'am." "You available evenings? We do most of our work after business hours." "Yes, ma'am." "Can you work independently without supervision?" Mary thought of the years she had managed international teams across 3 continents, coordinating multi-million-dollar projects with minimal oversight. "Yes, ma'am." Rosa handed her a blue uniform and an address. "Start tomorrow. Davis & Associates building downtown. 28th floor, don't be late." And that was how Mary Christine Hartwell, former BMW executive, became Mary Johnson, invisible cleaning lady. The transformation was complete, but the woman inside the uniform remained unchanged, brilliant, competent, and desperately underestimated by everyone around her. For 2 years, she had cleaned around the executives at Davis & Associates. Listening to their conversations about international markets, she understood better than they did, watching them struggle with problems she could solve in her sleep. But she had remained silent, invisible, safe in her anonymity, until today, when desperation in John Davis's voice awakened the executive she thought she had buried forever. 2 years into her cleaning job. Present day. Mary Johnson had developed a precise routine over her 2 years at Davis & Associates. She arrived at 6 p.m. just as the last executives were leaving and worked until 2 a.m., moving through the building like a silent shadow. She knew which executives stayed late, Richard from accounting always, who left their coffee cups everywhere, Patricia from marketing, and which offices generated the most sensitive documents in their trash cans, all of them. The irony was crushing and constant. As she emptied John Davis's wastebasket, she would see discarded drafts of international contracts with clauses that made her wince at their legal vulnerabilities. When she cleaned the conference room after board meetings, she would hear fragments of conversations about European market entry strategies that were fundamentally flawed. "The German automotive sector is too saturated," she had overheard Patricia telling the marketing team just last month. "We should focus on France instead." Mary had bitten her tongue, knowing that Patricia's analysis was completely wrong. Germany's automotive aftermarket was experiencing a major shift toward American suppliers, creating opportunities worth hundreds of millions for companies that understood the regulatory landscape. But Mary Johnson, the cleaning lady, had no voice in these decisions. The worst moments came when she cleaned around ongoing meetings, forced to listen to executives make costly mistakes she could have prevented with a 5-minute conversation. But speaking up would mean revealing her background, inviting questions, risking the exposure that could destroy the fragile stability she had built for herself and Michael. Michael was thriving now, despite everything. At 18, he had adapted to American life with the resilience of youth, excelling in his senior year despite the language and cultural barriers. His dream was Northwestern University, the same school where Mary had earned her MBA 13 years earlier, back when the future seemed limitless. "Mum, I got my acceptance letter today," Michael had told her just 2 weeks ago, his eyes bright with excitement and apprehension. Mary's heart had soared and broken simultaneously. Northwestern's tuition was $55,000 per year, more money than she made in her entire annual salary at Clean Solutions. The scholarship he had received covered half, but the remaining amount might as well have been $1 million. "We'll figure it out," she had told him, the same words she had been saying for 4 years. But privately, Mary knew that her son's brilliant mind might be wasted because of choices his father had made and consequences that had followed them across the ocean. Every night as she cleaned the offices of people who made more in bonuses than she made in salary, Mary carried the weight of her silence. She was arguably the most qualified person in the building to advise on international business expansion, yet she was paid to empty their trash cans. The juxtaposition was surreal and heartbreaking, but she had learned to compartmentalize, to separate the woman she had been from the woman she needed to be. Mary Christine Hartwell could analyze European markets and negotiate million-dollar deals. Mary Johnson cleaned toilets and remained invisible. The system worked, as long as she never let the two worlds collide. She had nearly broken her silence once, 6 months ago, when she overheard John Davis on a conference call with potential investors in Frankfurt. His pronunciation of German technical terms was so mangled that she could see the deal falling apart in real time. She had actually taken a step toward his office door, prepared to offer help, when Jennifer had walked by and given her a pointed look. "Mary, the bathrooms on the executive floor need attention," Jennifer had said, her tone making it clear that cleaning ladies shouldn't linger near important conversations. Mary had retreated to the supply closet, where she spent 20 minutes organizing cleaning supplies she had organized the day before, listening to John Davis lose a potential contract that could have been saved with proper translation. That night, she had gone home and told Michael about Northwestern's financial aid office, about scholarship opportunities and student loans, about anything except the fact that she could probably solve their money problems with a single conversation, if she was willing to risk everything they had built. But Mary Johnson was not Mary Christine Hartwell. Mary Johnson was safe, invisible, and employed. Mary Christine Hartwell was a scandal, a liability, a woman whose husband's crimes had made her toxic in the corporate world. So she had remained silent, night after night, cleaning around conversations that could change her life if she simply had the courage to speak. Until today, when John Davis's desperate voice carried a pain she recognized too well, the sound of someone watching everything they had built crumble, powerless to stop it. When she heard that sound, Mary realized that some things were more important than staying safe, more important than remaining invisible. Sometimes being human meant taking risks that could destroy you, and sometimes it meant that the person everyone overlooks might be exactly the person everyone needs. As Mary stood in the doorway of John Davis's office, having just revealed her most dangerous secret, she realized there was no going back now. The executives, staring at her in shocked silence, were about to learn that their cleaning lady had been hiding in plain sight for 2 years, carrying expertise that could save or destroy them all. The only question now was whether they would listen to her, or whether her desperate gamble would cost her the only job she had left. Present day. Davis and Associates, 28th floor. The silence in John Davis's office stretched like a taut wire, ready to snap. Mary felt the weight of 4 sets of eyes evaluating her, dissecting her claim, trying to reconcile the invisible cleaning lady with someone who could speak fluent German. The air conditioning hummed softly, the only sound in a room where a $500 million deal hung in the balance. John Davis was the first to recover. "Mary, Johnson, is it?" He glanced at Jennifer, who nodded confirmation. "You're telling me that you, our cleaning lady, speak fluent German?" Mary straightened her shoulders, feeling the familiar tension between who she was and who she appeared to be. "Yes, sir. I lived in Munich for 12 years. I'm completely fluent in German, and I understand international business protocols." Richard, the CFO, let out a short laugh that held no humor. "This is insane. We're about to meet with one of Germany's most prestigious investment groups, and we're considering trusting our translator to—" He gestured at Mary's uniform with barely concealed disdain. "To someone who cleans our offices." Patricia from marketing shook her head. "John, we can't possibly—" "What choice do we have?" John Davis interrupted, his desperation overriding social conventions. He turned back to Mary. "You said you lived in Munich for 12 years. What did you do there?" Mary felt the familiar knot in her stomach, the moment where her 2 worlds collided. She could lie, invent a safe story about being an expatriate wife, avoid the complications that came with the truth, or she could reveal everything and face the consequences. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, she could see a black Mercedes sedan pulling up to the building's entrance. 2 men in expensive suits emerged, one elderly with silver hair, one younger and sharp-eyed. The Muller father and son team that represented the future of Davis and Associates. "I worked in automotive," Mary said quietly. "Automotive how?" John Davis pressed. "Dealership? Parts supplier?" Mary took a deep breath, crossing a bridge she could never uncross. "I was director of North American operations for BMW Group. I managed a $1 billion portfolio for 8 years. The silence that followed was different from before, not just surprised, but stunned. Jennifer's mouth actually dropped open. Richard looked like he had been slapped. Patricia found her voice first. That's impossible. If you had that kind of background, what are you doing cleaning our offices?" Mary felt the familiar shame rise in her throat, but she pushed it down. Michael needed Northwestern. John Davis needed this deal, and maybe after 4 years of hiding, it was time to stop being invisible. "My husband was arrested for tax evasion and fraud in Germany. The scandal destroyed my career. I came back to Chicago with nothing and couldn't find corporate work because of the association with his crimes. She met John Davis's eyes directly. I needed a job to support my son. Clean Solutions hired me when no one else would. John Davis stared at her for a long moment, processing this impossible information. A former BMW executive had been cleaning his office for 2 years, and he had never known. The woman he had never bothered to really see was potentially the most qualified person in his company to handle international business negotiations. Jennifer's phone buzzed. "Sir, the Millers are in the lobby." John Davis looked at his watch. Exactly 3:00 p.m. The moment of decision had arrived. "Can you really do this?" he asked Mary. "Can you handle a negotiation at this level?" Mary thought of all the board meetings she had run in Munich, all the international deals she had closed, all the expertise she had been hiding for 2 years. "I can do this, Mr. Davis, but I need you to understand something." "What?" "If I walk into that conference room as your translator, I won't just be translating words. I'll be listening to their business strategy, their negotiation tactics, their real intentions. I know how German investors think and operate. I can help you get a better deal than you're expecting." Richard scoffed. "This is ridiculous. We're going to trust the most important negotiation in our company's history to someone who knows more about international business than anyone else in this building," Mary interrupted, her voice carrying an authority that made everyone in the room stop and listen. "Someone who has closed deals worth more than this company's annual revenue? Someone who understands exactly what the Millers want before they even say it?" John Davis made his decision. "Richard, get her a blazer from Patricia's office. Jennifer, brief Mary on our position and our bottom line." He turned to Mary. "Are you absolutely certain you can do this?" Mary nodded, feeling Mary Christine Hartwell awakening after 4 years of enforced sleep. "I'm certain." "Then let's go save this company." As Mary was rushed into a borrowed blazer and given a crash course in Davis & Associates' negotiating position, she realized that the next hour would determine everything, not just the future of John Davis's company, but whether Mary Johnson would remain invisible forever, or whether Mary Christine Hartwell could rise from the ashes of scandal and prove that sometimes the most unlikely person is exactly the right person. The Müllers were waiting in Conference Room A, and they were about to meet a cleaning lady who might just be the most dangerous negotiator they had ever encountered. But first, Mary had to convince John Davis's team that she was worth the enormous risk they were all taking. Conference Room A had been transformed into a battlefield, disguised as a business meeting. The polished mahogany table reflected the afternoon light, streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, while leather chairs arranged in perfect symmetry awaited the combatants. Mary stood in the corner, no longer in her cleaning uniform, but wearing Patricia's borrowed blazer over her own clothes, trying to look like she belonged among the executives who still eyed her with barely concealed skepticism. Hans Müller entered first, a distinguished man in his 70s with silver hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to commanding rooms filled with powerful people. Behind him came his son Klaus, 40 years old with sharp features and the calculating eyes of a man who had built his reputation on finding weakness in every deal. Dr. Weber, their legal counsel, completed the trio carrying a briefcase that Mary knew contained contracts designed to favor German interests at every turn. "Gentlemen, welcome to Davis & Associates," John Davis said in English, his nervousness barely concealed. "Please allow me to introduce my team." He went around the table, Jennifer, Richard, Patricia, each offering polite handshakes and business cards. Mary stood quietly to the side, still invisible in her borrowed clothes, waiting for her moment of introduction. "And this," John Davis said, his voice carrying the slightest tremor, "is Mary Johnson, our consultant for international affairs and translator for today's meeting." Hans Müller's eyes moved to Mary with polite but distant interest. In German, he said to his son, "She's quite young for a senior consultant. I hope Davis hasn't overestimated his team's capabilities." Klaus responded in rapid German, "Americans often bring junior staff to important meetings to make themselves appear larger. Let's see if she can even keep up with basic translation." Dr. Weber added dismissively, "If we need to slow down our discussion for translation issues, this could take much longer than planned." Mary felt every word like a familiar challenge. She had heard variations of this conversation countless times in Munich, powerful men underestimating people based on appearance, age, or gender. But this time, she had an advantage they couldn't see coming. She stepped forward and addressed Hans Müller directly in perfect formal German. Herr Müller, it is an honor to meet you. I had the pleasure of working with your Munich office several years ago when I was with BMW Group. Your reputation for fair but thorough negotiations is well known in international business circles. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Hans Müller's eyebrows shot up in surprise, while Klaus and Dr. Weber exchanged glances that clearly said they had not expected this level of linguistic competency. Hans Müller switched to German, his tone now respectful. Your German is excellent, Ms. Johnson. May I ask which division of BMW you worked with? I was Director of North American Operations from 2011 to 2019, Mary replied smoothly. I managed the market expansion strategy for luxury vehicles across the United States and Canada. Klaus Müller leaned forward with sudden interest. Wait, Johnson, weren't you Mary Hartwell then? I remember the name from industry reports. Mary felt her heart skip, but kept her expression neutral. Yes, I was Mary Hartwell at BMW. I returned to the United States several years ago. She deliberately didn't mention why she had left, but she could see recognition dawning in Klaus's eyes. He remembered the scandal, but he also remembered her professional reputation before everything fell apart. Hans Müller gestured toward the conference table. Please, shall we begin? I must say, Mr. Davis, having someone with Ms. Johnson's background involved gives me much more confidence in today's discussion. As they settled around the table, Mary caught John Davis's expression, a mixture of amazement, relief, and dawning realization that his cleaning lady had just established credibility with German investors in 30 seconds that might have taken his team hours to achieve. Klaus Müller opened a leather portfolio and began speaking in German. Father, before we begin the formal presentation, perhaps we should discuss our concerns about Davis and Associates' limited international experience. He was speaking to his father, but Mary realized he was also testing her comprehension. Could this American consultant really follow complex business German, or had they simply memorized a few polite phrases? Mary translated seamlessly, Mr. Davis, Klaus Müller is suggesting they'd like to discuss their concerns about our company's international experience before reviewing the formal proposal. But then she did something that made every German in the room sit up straighter. She continued in German. Herr Klaus, if I may address your concerns directly, Davis and Associates may not have extensive European operations yet, but that's precisely why this partnership represents such an exceptional opportunity for strategic expansion. Dr. Weber adjusted his glasses and leaned forward. In German, he said, Ms. Johnson, your directness is refreshing. Too many American consultants waste time with diplomatic language when business clarity is preferable. Mary smiled. In my experience, German investors appreciate efficiency over flattery. Shall we discuss the specific terms of the partnership? Hans Müller clapped his hands together once. Excellent, Klaus. I believe we can proceed with confidence. Around the table, the Davis and Associates team sat in stunned silence as their former cleaning lady conducted business negotiations in flawless German with some of Europe's most sophisticated investors. Patricia looked like she was witnessing magic, while Richard appeared to be re-evaluating every assumption he had ever made about competence and appearances. But Mary wasn't done surprising them yet. As Klaus Müller began outlining the proposed partnership terms, she realized the Germans were presenting a version of the deal that was significantly different from what Davis and Associates had been expecting, and not in their favor. The real negotiation was about to begin, and Mary was about to demonstrate that she wasn't just a translator. She was about to become the most valuable player Davis and Associates had never known they had. The question was, would John Davis trust her enough to let her do what she did best? Klaus Müller spread the contract documents across the mahogany table with the precision of a chess master arranging his pieces. Each page represented months of careful preparation by German lawyers, every clause designed to maximize Müller Group's advantages while appearing generous on the surface. Mary recognized the strategy immediately. She had seen it countless times in Munich, and she knew exactly how this game was played. The partnership structure is quite straightforward, Klaus began in German, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. Davis and Associates would handle North American distribution for our European technology portfolio, while we provide the capital infrastructure and market expertise. Mary translated accurately, but as she listened to the details, alarm bells rang in her mind. The revenue split Klaus was describing, 70% to Mueller Group, 30% to Davis and Associates, was completely different from the 50-50 partnership John Davis had been expecting. The initial investment commitment from Davis and Associates would be $50 million, Dr. Weber continued in German, with performance benchmarks that must be met quarterly to maintain partnership status. Mary translated, watching John Davis's face grow pale. She knew he had budgeted $20 million for the partnership launch, not $50 million. The Germans were essentially asking Davis and Associates to assume all the financial risk while accepting minority returns. Hans Müller smiled benevolently as he added in German, "Of course, all intellectual property developed during the partnership would remain with Mueller Group, as we're providing the foundational technology platforms." This was the knockout punch. Mary translated this clause and saw Richard literally grip the edge of the table. Davis and Associates would be investing $50 million to essentially become a junior sales partner for German products, with no ownership stake in anything they helped develop. John Davis looked confused and overwhelmed. "Mary, ask them about the revenue projections we discussed in our preliminary talks. The numbers they're presenting seem—" Klaus interrupted smoothly in German. "Please assure Mr. Davis that these terms reflect current European market realities. American companies often have unrealistic expectations about international partnerships." Mary translated this patronizing comment, and she saw something snap in John Davis's eyes. But before he could respond, she made a decision that would change everything. "Herr Klaus," she said in German, her tone remaining perfectly professional, "I think there may be some confusion about the market realities we're discussing." Klaus smiled condescendingly. "Oh? Please elaborate, Ms. Johnson." Mary opened the laptop that Jennifer had provided and pulled up a screen she had prepared during their brief preparation meeting. According to the latest European Investment Council reports, which I'm sure you're familiar with, American technology partnerships in the automotive sector are outperforming German domestic investments by 23% over the past 2 years. Klaus's smile faltered slightly. These were real numbers, and Mary was presenting them with the confidence of someone who understood their implications. Mary continued, "Furthermore, the IP protection clause you've proposed would actually violate updated U.S. patent law regarding joint venture development, potentially exposing Mueller Group to significant legal liability in American markets." Dr. Weber's eyes sharpened. "What specific legal liability?" Mary turned to address him directly. "The International Business Investment Act of 2023 requires that all intellectual property developed using American investment capital in joint ventures must grant the American partner minimum 40% ownership stakes, or the entire partnership can be dissolved by U.S. courts with full asset recovery for the American company." The room fell silent. Mary had just cited a real law that the German legal team had apparently missed in their contract preparation. Dr. Weber was furiously flipping through his legal files, looking for references to this regulation. Hans Müller leaned back in his chair, studying Mary with new eyes. In German, he said quietly, "Ms. Johnson, you seem to understand international business law quite thoroughly for a consultant." Mary met his gaze steadily. "Herr Müller, with respect, your team seems to have confused American naivety with American due diligence. Davis and Associates didn't ask me to translate today. They asked me to ensure this partnership benefits everyone equally." Klaus was no longer smiling. "And what would you suggest as more equitable terms?" Mary turned to John Davis. "Mr. Davis, based on the legal and market realities we're discussing, I'd recommend countering with a 55-45 revenue split in our favor, a $25 million initial investment cap with milestone-based scaling, and joint IP ownership for any technology developed using American resources." John Davis looked stunned. "Is that realistic?" Mary turned back to the Germans. "Herr Klaus, your European market analysis is excellent, but I believe you've underestimated the value of American market access. Davis and Associates isn't just a distribution partner. They're offering you entry into a $2.3 trillion technology market with established relationships across major metropolitan areas. She pulled up another screen. Our preliminary market research indicates that European technology companies with American partners are generating 340% higher returns than companies trying to enter US markets independently. Hans Müller exchanged a long look with his son. In German, he said, "She's not wrong about the market analysis. And if she's correct about the legal issues," Dr. Weber looked up from his frantic research. "The International Business Investment Act is real. We missed it in our preparation." Klaus Müller set down his pen and studied Mary with something approaching respect. "Ms. Johnson, you've presented some compelling arguments. Perhaps we should recess and reconsider our position." Mary smiled. "That's entirely reasonable. But before we break, I'd like to propose one additional consideration that might benefit everyone, which is," Mary looked around the table at both teams, "what if instead of viewing this as a traditional licensing partnership, we structured it as a true joint venture with shared risk and shared reward? I have some ideas about market positioning that could potentially triple your projected returns." Hans Müller's eyebrows rose. "Triple? I'd be happy to present the analysis after your team has reviewed the legal framework we've discussed." As the Germans filed out for their recess, Mary felt the weight of every eye in the room. John Davis, Jennifer, Richard, and Patricia were staring at her as if seeing her for the first time. "Mary," John Davis said quietly, "what the hell just happened?" Mary straightened her borrowed blazer. "We just leveled the playing field, Mr. Davis. Now comes the real negotiation." But outside in the hallway, she could hear Klaus Müller speaking rapidly in German to his father. "She's not just a translator, father. That woman is dangerous. We need to completely revise our approach." Mary smiled to herself. After 4 years of being invisible, it felt good to be dangerous again. The question now was whether she was ready for what came next. The Davis and Associates team sat in stunned silence after the Germans left for their recess. Mary remained standing at the head of the conference table, still wearing Patricia's borrowed blazer, but now radiating an authority that filled the entire room. The transformation was so complete that Jennifer kept glancing at her as if trying to reconcile this confident negotiator with the quiet woman who had cleaned these offices for 2 years. John Davis was the first to find his voice. "Mary, I need you to explain what just happened. Are you telling me that our cleaning lady just out-negotiated one of Germany's most powerful investment groups?" Mary sat down in the chair that had somehow become hers during the meeting. "Mr. Davis, I wasn't out-negotiating them. I was correcting their assumptions and protecting your interests." Richard, who had been frantically taking notes, looked up with a mixture of admiration and bewilderment. "The legal statute you cited, the International Business Investment Act, how did you know about that?" "I make it my business to understand international business law," Mary replied simply. "When you've worked in global markets, you learn that legal frameworks change constantly. The Germans missed this particular update, which would have made their original contract legally vulnerable." Patricia leaned forward. "Mary, the market analysis you presented, those weren't numbers from our research packets." Mary pulled out her phone and opened a business application. "I subscribe to the European Investment Council's quarterly reports. I've been tracking automotive and technology partnerships for the past 4 years, even after—" She paused. "Even after I left BMW." John Davis stared at her. "You've been following international business trends while working as our janitor?" "Old habits," Mary said with a slight smile. "Once you understand global markets, you can't stop seeing the patterns. I've watched your company struggle with international expansion for 2 years, knowing I could help, but not knowing how to offer without compromising my position." Jennifer spoke for the first time since the meeting began. "Your position as what? I mean, who are you really?" Mary took a deep breath. The moment of complete truth had arrived. "My name is Mary Christine Johnson, formerly Mary Christine Hartwell. I was Director of North American Operations for BMW Group from 2011 to 2019. I managed market expansion strategies across the United States, Canada, and Mexico, with a portfolio responsibility of $1.2 billion annually. I closed partnership deals with Ford, General Motors, and Tesla during the electric vehicle transition period. The room was absolutely silent. Mary continued, "I have an MBA in international business from Northwestern University. I'm fluent in German, French, and Spanish, and I've negotiated more international business contracts than everyone else in this room combined." Richard found his voice. "Then why was I cleaning your offices?" Mary finished. "Because when my husband was arrested for financial crimes in Germany, the scandal made me unemployable in international business. I came back to Chicago with my teenage son and no money. Clean Solutions hired me when no corporate recruiter would return my phone calls." John Davis leaned back in his chair, processing this information. "You've been working here for 2 years, watching us make international business decisions, never saying anything. What was I supposed to say?" "Excuse me, I know you think I'm just the cleaning lady, but your European expansion strategy is fundamentally flawed." Mary's voice carried a note of bitter humor. "I needed this job, Mr. Davis. My son needed stability." Patricia asked quietly, "Your son, is he the reason you couldn't just start over somewhere else?" Mary's expression softened. "Michael is 18 now. He was accepted to Northwestern University, my alma mater. Full scholarship based on academic merit, but we still need money for housing and expenses. This job was the only income I could find that allowed me to keep him in school and fed while staying off the radar of background check systems that would flag the BMW scandal." Jennifer was staring at her. "Mary, all those times I asked you to clean the conference room after board meetings." "I heard every word," Mary confirmed. "Your market analysis for European expansion, your concerns about German business culture, your worries about legal compliance in international contracts. I could have saved you 6 months of trial and error." John Davis rubbed his forehead. "This is insane. We've had the most qualified international business consultant in Chicago emptying our trash cans for 2 years." "And now?" Mary asked. "Klaus Müller recognized my name from my BMW days. Word will get out that Mary Hartwell is working for Davis and Associates, which means my cover is blown regardless of how this meeting ends." Through the conference room windows, Mary could see the German team huddled in intense conversation in the building lobby. Klaus was gesticulating emphatically, while Dr. Weber scrolled through his laptop, presumably researching everything he could find about Mary's background. John Davis followed her gaze. "What do you think they're discussing?" Mary smiled grimly. "Klaus is telling his father that they completely underestimated Davis and Associates' capabilities. Dr. Weber is researching my professional history and probably finding glowing performance reviews from BMW that predate the scandal. And Hans Müller is deciding whether to walk away from this deal or completely revise their strategy." "What would you do if you were them?" Richard asked. Mary considered the question seriously. "If I were Klaus Müller, I'd be furious that an American company had hidden their most dangerous negotiator and let me walk into a trap. But if I were Hans Müller, I'd be impressed by the tactical sophistication and wondering what other surprises Davis and Associates might have in store." John Davis made a decision. "Mary, I want you to lead the rest of this negotiation." "Sir? You understand these people, you know international business law, and you clearly have their respect. What do you need from me?" Mary felt something shift inside her chest, not just gratitude, but the familiar excitement of a complex business challenge. "I need you to trust me, Mr. Davis, and I need everyone in this room to understand that the next hour will determine whether Davis and Associates becomes a major international player or remains a regional firm forever." Patricia asked, "What are you planning?" Mary opened her laptop and pulled up a presentation she had been mentally preparing for months. "I'm going to show the Müller Group something they've never seen before, an American company that understands European business better than they understand American business." Jennifer's phone buzzed. "Mr. Davis, the German team is requesting to reconvene." Mary stood up and straightened her borrowed blazer one more time. "Gentlemen, ladies, let's go change the future of this company." As the team prepared to reconvene, Mary realized that she was no longer Mary Johnson, the invisible cleaning lady, or even Mary Christine Hartwell, the disgraced former executive. She was becoming someone new, someone who had earned her authority through competence rather than title, someone who had been tested by failure and emerged stronger. The Germans were returning to face an adversary they had never anticipated, and Mary was ready to show them exactly why underestimating the underdog was the biggest mistake they could make. The German team returned to conference room A with visibly altered body language. Klaus Müller's earlier confidence had been replaced by wary respect, while Dr. Weber carried additional legal documents, clearly having done extensive research during their recess. Hans Müller, however, seemed intrigued rather than disturbed, his experienced eyes studying Mary with the appreciation of one master negotiator recognizing another. "Ms. Johnson," Hans Müller began in German, his tone now entirely respectful, "my son has informed me of your impressive background with BMW Group. Klaus recalls your reputation for innovative market strategies in the North American automotive sector." Mary inclined her head graciously. "Herr Müller, I appreciate your kind words. However, I believe the more relevant question is how we can structure a partnership that maximizes value for both organizations moving forward." Klaus leaned forward, his approach now collaborative rather than adversarial. "Dr. Weber has reviewed the legal framework you mentioned. You were correct about the International Business Investment Act. Our legal team will need to completely restructure the intellectual property provisions." "That's certainly one approach," Mary replied smoothly, "but I'd like to suggest we think more strategically about the entire partnership structure." She opened her laptop and projected a presentation onto the conference room's main screen. The first slide read, "Davis and Associates plus Müller Group, a strategic joint venture for market domination." John Davis's eyes widened. During their brief recess, Mary had somehow prepared a complete business presentation that addressed every aspect of the partnership with professional polish that rivaled anything his company had ever produced. "The traditional model you've proposed," Mary continued, addressing the Germans directly in their language, "treats Davis and Associates as a distribution channel for Müller Group products. But this approach fundamentally undervalues both organizations' core competencies." Her next slide showed a complex market analysis comparing European companies' performance in American markets with and without strategic American partnerships. "Müller Group's strength lies in engineering excellence and European market knowledge," Mary explained. "Davis and Associates' strength lies in American market penetration and regulatory navigation. But the real opportunity exists in the intersection of these competencies." Klaus studied the data. "What intersection?" Mary clicked to the next slide. "Joint product development specifically designed for American markets, using German engineering standards but American consumer insights. Instead of simply selling European products to American customers, we create new products that couldn't exist without this partnership." Hans Müller's eyes lit up with interest. "Can you provide specific examples?" Mary had clearly anticipated this question. "Certainly. The American automotive aftermarket is shifting toward integrated smart technology systems. European companies excel at precision engineering, but American companies understand user experience design and regulatory compliance. A joint venture could develop products that neither company could create independently." She pulled up detailed market projections. "Our analysis suggests this approach could generate $400 million in revenue within 3 years, with 60% higher profit margins than traditional licensing arrangements." Dr. Weber looked up from his notes. "These projections are based on what data?" Mary smiled. "Proprietary market research I've been conducting for the past 2 years, combined with consumer trend analysis from my network of contacts in both the American and European automotive industries." Richard whispered to John Davis. "She's been doing market research for 2 years while cleaning our offices." Mary heard him and addressed the comment directly. "Mr. Richard, when you have expertise in a field, you don't stop thinking about it just because your job title changes. I've been watching market trends, maintaining industry contacts and analyzing opportunities because it's what I do. The fact that I was paid to clean offices doesn't mean my brain stopped working." Patricia leaned forward with genuine curiosity. "Mary, what kind of industry contacts are we talking about?" Mary pulled up her phone and scrolled through her contact list. "Former colleagues from BMW who are now at Mercedes, Audi, and Volkswagen. American executives I worked with who moved to Ford, GM, and Tesla. Regulatory specialists who helped me navigate international compliance issues during my Munich years. Venture capitalists who funded automotive technology startups based on market analyses I provided. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Their cleaning lady hadn't just been a former executive. She had maintained an active network of industry relationships throughout her 4 years of professional exile. Klaus Müller spoke carefully. "Ms. Johnson, are you suggesting that Davis & Associates has access to industry intelligence networks that we weren't aware of?" Mary met his gaze directly. "Herr Klaus, I'm suggesting that partnerships are most successful when both sides bring their complete range of capabilities to the table. Davis & Associates isn't just a regional American company. Through me, you're gaining access to decision-makers and market intelligence across multiple continents." She clicked to her next slide, which showed a network diagram of international business connections spanning Europe, North America, and Asia. "Furthermore," Mary continued, "the scandal that ended my formal corporate career actually created an advantage for this partnership. I'm not bound by non-compete agreements or corporate loyalty conflicts. I can share insights and make introductions that would be impossible for currently employed executives." Hans Müller was now leaning forward with intense interest. "What kind of insights?" Mary's expression became serious. "For example, I can tell you that Mercedes is planning a major announcement in 6 weeks that will reshape the American luxury automotive market. I can tell you which American dealership networks are struggling financially and would be open to European partnership opportunities. I can tell you which regulatory changes are coming in California that will create massive opportunities for companies prepared to move quickly." Klaus and Dr. Weber exchanged glances. This wasn't just business intelligence. This was the kind of strategic information that could be worth hundreds of millions of dollars if acted upon correctly. John Davis finally found his voice. "Mary, are you telling us that you've been maintaining active industry intelligence networks while working as our janitor?" Mary turned to him with a slight smile. "Mr. Davis, I told you 4 years ago that I'd never stop being who I am. I just changed how I made money. But my expertise, my relationships, and my understanding of international markets never went away. They just became unofficial." Hans Müller sat back in his chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Ms. Johnson, I believe we need to completely reconceptualize this entire partnership." "How so, Herr Müller?" "We came here thinking we were negotiating with a regional American company that needed our European expertise. Instead, we're apparently negotiating with an international business intelligence network that happens to be based in Chicago." Mary nodded. "That's a much more accurate assessment." Klaus looked at his father, then at Mary. "What would you propose as the structure for this reconceptualized partnership?" Mary clicked to her final slide. "Equal partnership. 50-50 ownership, 50-50 investment, 50-50 returns. Joint product development, shared market intelligence, and coordinated global expansion. Davis & Associates brings American market access and international intelligence networks. Müller Group brings European engineering excellence and established manufacturing capabilities." She paused, looking around the table at both teams. "But most importantly, both companies commit to complete transparency and resource sharing. No hidden advantages, no proprietary restrictions, no competitive secrecy. True partnership." Dr. Weber was taking rapid notes. "The legal framework for this would be extraordinarily complex." Mary smiled. "Dr. Weber, I spent 8 years structuring international partnerships for BMW. Complex legal frameworks are exactly what I'm best at." Hans Müller clapped his hands once. "Outstanding. Klaus, I believe we found our American partners." But Mary held up one hand. "Herr Müller, before we celebrate, there's one more thing you need to know." The room tensed. "What's that, Ms. Johnson?" Mary looked directly at John Davis. "Mr. Davis, if you accept this partnership with me as your international business director, you'll need to offer me a position that reflects my actual value to this company. I won't be cleaning your offices anymore." John Davis laughed, the first genuine laugh heard in the room all day. "Mary, I think we can work something out." As handshakes were exchanged and preliminary agreements were reached, Mary realized that her 4-year exile was finally over. But more than that, she had transformed her greatest professional failure into the foundation for something unprecedented, a partnership built not on corporate hierarchy or traditional power structures, but on proven competence and mutual respect. The invisible cleaning lady had just negotiated herself into the most important business deal of her career, and everyone in the room knew they had witnessed something remarkable. But the real test would come in the weeks ahead, when the business world discovered that Mary Christine Hartwell had returned, not as a cautionary tale of corporate scandal, but as the secret weapon that transformed Davis and Associates into an international powerhouse. 3 weeks after the German partnership meeting, Mary Christine Johnson sat in the corner office that had once belonged to Davis and Associates' former vice president of international development, a position that had remained vacant for 8 months because John Davis couldn't find anyone qualified for the role. The irony wasn't lost on her that she had been cleaning this same office every night for 2 years, dusting the empty desk where she now sat, reviewing contracts worth more than she had earned in her entire previous career. The mahogany desk was now covered with documents in German, French and Spanish, while 3 computer monitors displayed real-time market data from European, American and Asian exchanges. Her wall featured a large map of the world, with colored pins marking potential partnership opportunities she had identified through her network of international contacts. But the most significant change wasn't in the office decor. It was in how people looked at her when she walked through the building. "Good morning, Ms. Johnson," Jennifer said as she knocked on the open office door, carrying a stack of translated documents and wearing an expression of professional respect that would have been unimaginable 3 weeks ago. "The preliminary contracts from Munich are ready for your review." Mary looked up from her computer, where she had been video conferencing with former BMW colleagues now working at Mercedes-Benz headquarters in Stuttgart. "Thank you, Jennifer. Any word from Klaus Müller about the manufacturing timeline?" "He called an hour ago. They're ahead of schedule on the prototype development. He specifically asked me to tell you that your market specifications were exceptionally precise." His words. Mary smiled. Klaus Müller, who had initially dismissed her as an unqualified translator, now called her directly for strategic advice on American market positioning. The transformation in their professional relationship had been swift and comprehensive. "Ms. Johnson?" Patricia appeared in the doorway, holding a marketing presentation. "I wanted to run our promotional strategy past you before we finalize the campaign materials." 3 weeks ago, Patricia had been annoyed by Mary's presence in executive meetings. Now she sought Mary's approval on all international marketing initiatives, having learned that Mary's understanding of cross-cultural business communication far exceeded anyone else's in the company. "Of course. What's your approach?" Patricia entered the office and opened her laptop. "We're positioning the partnership as German engineering meets American innovation, but I wanted to make sure we're not inadvertently triggering any cultural sensitivities in European markets." Mary reviewed the presentation, suggesting subtle changes that would resonate better with German consumers while maintaining appeal for American audiences. These were exactly the kinds of nuanced cultural insights that international companies typically paid consulting firms hundreds of thousands of dollars to provide. After Patricia left, Mary turned back to her monitors and pulled up the financial projections for the partnership's first quarter. The numbers were extraordinary. The joint venture was already generating more interest from potential clients than Davis and Associates had seen in their previous 5 years combined. Her phone rang. Hans Müller calling from Munich. "Guten Morgen, Herr Müller," Mary answered in German. "Good morning, Mary. I'm calling with excellent news. Mercedes-Benz has expressed interest in licensing our joint technology platform for their American electric vehicle rollout. They're proposing a $200 million development contract." Mary pulled up her Mercedes contacts on her computer. "That's wonderful news. Have they specified which technology components they're most interested in?" "The integrated user interface system you designed specifically for American regulatory compliance. Apparently, our competitors are struggling with EPA certification requirements, but your specifications anticipated those challenges months in advance." Mary had indeed anticipated these challenges, drawing on her years of experience navigating American automotive regulations. What made her valuable wasn't just her German language skills or her international business experience. It was her unique understanding of how European engineering excellence could be adapted for American market requirements. "Herr Müller, I'd recommend we schedule a joint presentation with the Mercedes team. I have relationships with their American division leadership that could accelerate the approval process." "Excellent. Mary, I must tell you, Klaus showed our board of directors the market intelligence reports you've been providing. They're calling you the most valuable strategic asset in our American operations. After ending the call, Mary leaned back in her leather chair and looked out her office window at the Chicago skyline. 28 floors below, she could see office workers hurrying along the sidewalks, many of them probably struggling with challenges they felt powerless to overcome. 3 weeks ago, she had been one of them. Invisible, underestimated, trapped by circumstances beyond her control. Now she was being called a strategic asset by one of Germany's most powerful business leaders. Her desk phone buzzed with an internal call. "Mary, it's John. Can you come to the main conference room? We have visitors." Mary walked down the hallway that she used to clean every night, past offices where executives who used to barely acknowledge her now nodded respectfully and asked for her opinions on international market trends. The transformation wasn't just in her career. It was in how the entire company understood the value of looking beyond appearances and job titles to recognize genuine competence. In the main conference room, John Davis was meeting with 3 men in expensive suits. Mary recognized them immediately. Executives from Thomson Industries, Davis and Associates' primary competitor in the Chicago market. "Gentlemen, I'd like you to meet Mary Johnson, our Director of International Business Development," John Davis said with obvious pride. The Thomson Industries CEO, a man named Robert Sterling, whom Mary knew by reputation, stood to shake her hand. "Ms. Johnson, we've been hearing remarkable things about Davis and Associates' recent international expansion. Word in the industry is that you've single-handedly transformed this company's global competitiveness." Mary accepted the handshake graciously. "I've been fortunate to work with an exceptional team, Mr. Sterling. We were hoping to discuss the possibility of partnering with your organization on some upcoming European opportunities. Our international division has been struggling to establish meaningful relationships with German manufacturers." Mary understood immediately what was happening. Thomson Industries, which had poached several Davis and Associates clients over the years, was now seeking partnership specifically because of Mary's expertise and connections. The tables had completely turned. John Davis looked at Mary, clearly curious about how she would handle this overture from their primary competitor. Mary considered the request carefully. "Mr. Sterling, I appreciate Thomson Industries' interest in collaboration. However, I'd need to understand more about your specific objectives and what unique value Thomson would bring to a partnership arrangement." It was a polite but pointed question. Mary was essentially asking what Thomson Industries could offer that would be worth sharing her carefully cultivated European relationships. Sterling's response revealed exactly how much the competitive landscape had changed. "Ms. Johnson, to be entirely candid, Thomson Industries has the largest client base in the Midwest, but we lack the international expertise and relationships that you've brought to Davis and Associates. We'd be willing to discuss significant partnership terms in exchange for access to your European network." Mary exchanged a look with John Davis. 3 weeks ago, Davis and Associates had been the smaller, regional firm hoping to compete with industry giants like Thomson Industries. Now Thomson was essentially admitting that Mary's expertise had made Davis and Associates the more attractive partner for international business. "I'll consider your proposal, Mr. Sterling," Mary said diplomatically. "Perhaps we could schedule a more detailed discussion after I've had time to review our current partnership commitments." After the Thomson Industries team left, John Davis turned to Mary with amazement. "Did our biggest competitor just come here to ask for our help?" Mary smiled. "Mr. Davis, that's what happens when people realize that the person they overlooked might be exactly the person they need." But even as Mary savored this moment of professional vindication, she knew the real test was still ahead. Word was spreading through Chicago's business community about the former cleaning lady who'd become an international business powerhouse. Soon the larger business world would learn her story, and she would face the ultimate challenge, proving that her success wasn't a fluke, but the beginning of a new chapter where competence mattered more than appearances, and where the right person in the wrong job could transform entire companies. The invisible woman had become impossible to ignore, but the biggest spotlight was yet to shine on her remarkable transformation. Chicago Business Conference, 2 months later. The grand ballroom of the Palmer House Hotel sparkled with crystal chandeliers and hummed with the conversations of Chicago's most powerful business leaders. The annual Chicago Business Conference drew CEOs, venture capitalists, and industry experts from across the Midwest, all gathered to hear presentations on innovation, leadership, and market trends that would shape the region's economic future. Mary stood backstage in the hotel's preparation area, adjusting the blazer of her new navy blue business suit, a far cry from the borrowed clothing she had worn during that first German negotiation. Her presentation slides were loaded and ready, her speaking notes reviewed one final time. In 15 minutes, she would address an audience of 800 business leaders as the conference's featured speaker on international business strategy. The irony was breathtaking. 6 months ago, she had been invisible in this same city, cleaning offices while the business elite made decisions she could have improved with a single conversation. Now she was the expert they had all come to hear. "Ms. Johnson?" A young conference organizer approached with a clipboard. "5 minutes until your introduction. The audience is quite excited. Your reputation has spread remarkably quickly through the Chicago business community." Mary nodded, feeling the familiar pre-presentation energy that she remembered from her BMW days. But this was different. Then, she had been speaking from a position of inherited corporate authority. Today, she was speaking from a position of proven competence earned through the hardest possible circumstances. Through the backstage curtains, she could see the audience settling into their seats. John Davis sat in the front row, barely containing his pride. Beside him sat Hans and Klaus Müller, who had flown from Munich specifically to hear Mary's presentation. Throughout the ballroom, she spotted executives from companies that had initially dismissed Davis and Associates, but were now seeking partnerships. "Ladies and gentlemen," the conference moderator's voice echoed through the sound system, "it is my privilege to introduce our keynote speaker." 6 months ago, Mary Johnson was virtually unknown in Chicago's business community. Today, she is being called one of the most innovative international business strategists in the Midwest. Mary took a deep breath, remembering another moment when her identity had been questioned and her competence doubted. Ms. Johnson transformed a regional Chicago company into an international powerhouse through a combination of deep industry expertise, cultural intelligence, and strategic relationship building that has impressed business leaders from Munich to Detroit. Please join me in welcoming Mary Johnson, Director of International Business Development for Davis & Associates. The applause was warm and sustained as Mary walked onto the stage. The spotlights were bright, but she had faced more intimidating audiences in conference rooms where millions of dollars hung in the balance based on her next words. "Thank you for that generous introduction," Mary began, her voice carrying clearly through the ballroom's sound system. "I want to start today by asking you a question that might make some of you uncomfortable. When was the last time you had a conversation with someone whose job title didn't match their actual capabilities?" A murmur went through the audience. This wasn't the typical opening for a business strategy presentation. 6 months ago, I was working as a janitor in a downtown Chicago office building. Every night I cleaned the desks of executives, emptied trash cans filled with international business correspondence, and listened to conference calls about European market expansion strategies that were fundamentally flawed. The ballroom was now completely silent. Mary had their full attention. I knew these strategies were flawed because I had spent 8 years as an international business executive, managing billion-dollar partnerships between American and European companies. But because my husband's financial crimes had destroyed my corporate reputation, I couldn't find work that matched my actual qualifications. Mary clicked to her first slide, showing a photograph of herself in her cleaning uniform, standing next to a photograph of herself presenting to the BMW Board of Directors. This is a story about the difference between appearance and competence, between job titles and actual capability, between what people assume and what is actually true. She could see executives throughout the audience leaning forward, recognizing the implications for their own organizations. For 2 years, I worked in an office building where some of the smartest business leaders in Chicago made international business decisions. But they never asked the cleaning lady for her opinion, even though the cleaning lady had more international business experience than anyone else in the building. Mary clicked to her next slide. The German Partnership, a case study in hidden assets. In March of this year, my employer was about to lose a $500 million partnership with German investors because their translator couldn't make the meeting. In desperation, they asked if anyone in the building spoke German. I revealed that I was not only fluent in German, but that I had extensive experience with German business culture and international partnership negotiations. The audience was now riveted. Mary could see people taking notes, recognizing that this wasn't just a personal story, but a business lesson with profound implications. The result was that Davis and Associates not only saved the partnership, but negotiated terms that were 40% more favorable than originally proposed. Within 2 months, the partnership had generated enough business interest to triple the company's projected revenue for the year. Mary clicked to a slide showing Davis and Associates' revenue growth chart. The numbers were dramatic and undeniable. But here's the crucial question. How many other hidden assets are working in your organizations right now? How many people with extraordinary capabilities are being underutilized because their current job titles don't reflect their actual potential? She clicked to her next slide, the hidden asset audit, finding excellence where you least expect it. I want to challenge everyone in this room to conduct what I call a hidden asset audit in your organizations. Talk to people whose jobs don't traditionally involve strategic input. Ask about their backgrounds, their education, their previous experience. You might be amazed by what you discover. Mary began sharing examples from her consulting work with other companies, describing situations where administrative assistants had engineering degrees, where maintenance workers had advanced business training, where part-time employees had specialized expertise that could transform entire departments. The modern economy has created a situation where many highly qualified people are working in positions below their actual capabilities due to economic necessity, career transitions, or life circumstances. Smart organizations are learning to identify and utilize these hidden assets. She clicked to a slide showing case studies of companies that had implemented hidden asset identification programs with impressive results in innovation, cost savings, and competitive advantage. At Davis and Associates, we now conduct quarterly interviews with all employees to understand their complete range of capabilities, not just their current job functions. We've discovered that our receptionist speaks fluent Mandarin and has an MBA in international finance. Our facilities manager has a degree in industrial engineering and has already suggested 3 process improvements that will save us $200,000 annually. The audience was now taking rapid notes and exchanging meaningful glances. Mary could see that her message was resonating deeply. The question isn't whether your organization has hidden assets, Mary continued. The question is whether you're smart enough to find them and strategic enough to utilize them. She clicked to her final slide. Competence over appearances, the competitive advantage of the future. In an increasingly competitive global economy, the companies that thrive will be those that recognize talent regardless of where it's currently positioned, that value competence over credentials, and that understand that the most valuable employee might be someone whose potential hasn't been recognized yet. Mary paused, looking out at the audience of business leaders who represented the economic power of one of America's most important business centers. 6 months ago, I was invisible in this city. Today, I'm standing before you as proof that exceptional people exist in unexpected places, waiting for someone wise enough to recognize their value. The question for each of you is, will you be that someone? The applause that followed was immediate, sustained, and heartfelt. As Mary left the stage, she was surrounded by executives eager to discuss partnership opportunities, speaking engagements, and consulting contracts. But more importantly, she could see in their faces that her message had changed, how they thought about talent recognition, employee development, and the hidden potential that might be sitting right under their noses. The invisible woman had not only found her voice again, she had used it to challenge an entire business community to see with clearer eyes and think with more open minds. The transformation was complete, but the real impact was just beginning. Northwestern University, Evanston, Illinois. 3 months later, the auditorium was packed beyond capacity as Mary walked across the stage to receive the Alumni Achievement Award from Northwestern University's Kellogg School of Management. In the audience, Michael sat in the front row wearing his Northwestern University student ID badge, his eyes bright with pride, as he watched his mother being honored by the same institution where she had earned her MBA 15 years earlier. Dean Margaret Whitman stepped to the podium, holding the Crystal Award that represented recognition of extraordinary professional accomplishment by a Northwestern alumna. "It is rare," Dean Whitman began, "to witness such a dramatic transformation in professional circumstances driven entirely by competence, integrity, and determination. Mary Christine Johnson represents everything we hope our graduates will become: innovative thinkers who create value not through politics or position, but through excellence and ethical leadership." Mary accepted the award with genuine humility, thinking of the journey that had brought her to this moment. The same university where she had studied international business theory was now honoring her for putting those theories into practice under the most challenging possible circumstances. But the real validation came 3 hours later, during the networking reception, when a familiar figure approached her through the crowd of business leaders and academics. Mary Hartwell. She turned to see Dr. James Richardson, her former professor of international business strategy, and the man who had written her original recommendation letter for the BMW position 13 years ago. "Professor Richardson," Mary smiled, extending her hand. "It's Mary Johnson now." Dr. Richardson studied her face with the intensity he had once reserved for examining complex business cases. "I've been following your story through the business journals. The Davis & Associates partnership, the German deal, the consulting work you've been doing. Mary, what you've accomplished is extraordinary. Thank you, Professor. Although I suspect the circumstances weren't exactly what you envisioned when you wrote my recommendation letter for BMW." Dr. Richardson's expression grew serious. "Mary, can we speak privately for a moment?" They moved to a quieter corner of the reception hall, away from the networking conversations and champagne toasts. "I need to tell you something," Dr. Richardson said quietly. "About 18 months ago, I received a call from a headhunting firm in Munich. They were conducting background research on you for a potential position with a German consulting company." Mary's heart stopped. "What did you tell them?" "I told them exactly what I would tell anyone who asked about your professional capabilities, that you were one of the most brilliant international business strategists I had ever taught, that your work at BMW was exemplary, and that any company would be fortunate to have you." Mary felt tears gathering in her eyes. "Professor, you didn't know about your husband's legal troubles? About the scandal that ended your BMW career?" Dr. Richardson's voice was gentle but firm. "Mary, I knew about Robert's arrest and the circumstances of your departure from Germany. I also knew that you had nothing to do with his crimes." "Then why didn't the German company follow up?" Dr. Richardson sighed. "Because they were more concerned with avoiding any association with scandal than they were with hiring the best person for the job. They chose to eliminate you from consideration based on circumstances beyond your control, rather than evaluating you based on your actual competence." Mary processed this information, realizing how close she had come to a very different path. "But here's what I want you to understand," Dr. Richardson continued. "Their loss became America's gain. What you've accomplished with Davis & Associates, the way you've transformed not just one company, but influenced how an entire business community thinks about talent recognition, that wouldn't have happened if you had simply returned to another executive position in Germany." Mary considered his words. "You think the struggle was necessary?" "I think the struggle revealed something about your character that success alone never could have shown. Anyone can perform well when they have resources, support, and institutional backing. But what you did, maintaining your expertise during years of professional exile, recognizing opportunity when it finally appeared, and having the courage to risk everything on a single moment of truth that required a level of personal strength that most executives never develop." Mary looked across the reception hall at Michael, who was deep in conversation with Dean Whitman about his business courses and career aspirations. He would graduate from Northwestern without debt, pursue graduate studies if he chose, and enter the professional world with opportunities that would have been impossible if she had remained invisible. "Professor, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "During those years when I was cleaning offices, when I felt completely invisible and professionally worthless, was I wrong to hide my capabilities? Should I have been more assertive about revealing my background?" Dr. Richardson considered the question carefully. "Mary, you did what you needed to do to survive and support your son, but I think what you've proven is that competence has a way of revealing itself when the circumstances are right. You couldn't force people to recognize your value, but you could be ready when they needed you. Their conversation was interrupted by Klaus Müller, who had been moving through the reception crowd and spotted Mary. "Mary, there you are," Klaus said in his accented English. "I wanted to personally congratulate you on the Northwestern recognition. My father asked me to tell you that the Müller Group Board of Directors has voted unanimously to offer you a position as Senior Strategic Consultant for our American operations." Mary raised an eyebrow. "Klaus, I already have a position with Davis & Associates." Klaus smiled. "We're not asking you to leave Davis & Associates. We're proposing a consulting arrangement that would allow you to work with multiple American companies seeking German partnerships. Essentially, we want to formalize your role as the bridge between German and American business cultures." Dr. Richardson listened to this exchange with obvious delight. "Mary, you've become what we academics call a cultural arbitrage specialist, someone who creates value by understanding differences between business cultures that others can't navigate." Mary considered Klaus's proposal. 6 months ago, she had been desperate for any kind of recognition. Now she was being offered opportunities to choose between multiple high-level consulting arrangements. "Klaus, I appreciate the offer. Let me discuss it with John Davis and see how we might structure something that benefits all parties." As Klaus moved on to continue networking, Dr. Richardson looked at Mary with professional admiration. "You know what I find most impressive about your story?" "What's that?" "You didn't just overcome the scandal and rebuild your career. You became better at what you do because of what you went through." The Mary Hartwell who left Munich 4 years ago was an excellent international business executive. The Mary Johnson who stands here today is a strategic innovator who understands the human elements of business in ways that can't be taught in any MBA program. Mary felt the truth of his words. The years of invisibility, of being overlooked and underestimated, had given her insights into organizational dynamics and human potential that she never could have gained from a corner office. "Professor, I have one more question." "Yes?" "How many other Mary Johnsons do you think are out there? People with extraordinary capabilities who are trapped in situations that don't reflect their potential?" Dr. Richardson smiled. "Based on what you've shown us, probably more than any of us realize. The question is whether the business community is smart enough to find them." As the reception wound down and Mary prepared to drive back to Chicago, she reflected on how completely her life had changed. The invisible cleaning lady had become a recognized expert. The desperate single mother had become a successful professional, and the woman who had lost everything had gained more than she had ever imagined possible. But perhaps most importantly, she had proven that competence doesn't disappear when circumstances change, that potential doesn't diminish when it's not immediately recognized, and that sometimes the person everyone overlooks is exactly the person everyone needs. The transformation was complete, but Mary realized that her real work was just beginning, not just building her own success, but helping others recognize that extraordinary people exist in the most unexpected places, waiting for someone wise enough to see their true value. Chicago Tribune business section, 6 months later. The headline read, "From Janitor to Executive, the Mary Johnson Story Sparks National Debate About Hidden Talent in Corporate America." Below it, a full-page article detailed Mary's transformation and its implications for business leadership, employee development, and talent recognition across American organizations. Mary sat in her expanded office. Davis & Associates had moved to a larger building to accommodate their international growth, reading the article that had made her story national news. The phone had been ringing all morning with interview requests from business magazines, speaking invitations from conferences across the country, and consulting opportunities from Fortune 500 companies seeking her expertise in identifying hidden assets within their organizations. But the call that mattered most came at 10:30 a.m. "Mary, it's Margaret Whitman from Northwestern. Have you seen this morning's Wall Street Journal?" Mary pulled up the Journal website on her computer. The headline made her heart race. "Former BMW executive scandal. New questions about corporate accountability and international business ethics." The article was a detailed investigation into Robert Hartwell's financial crimes, Mary's role at BMW during the period when the illegal activities occurred, and questions about whether she should have known about her husband's schemes. Most damaging was a quote from an unnamed BMW executive suggesting that Mary's rapid rise in the company had been facilitated by Robert's financial connections. Dean Whitman, I can explain. Mary, you don't need to explain anything to me, but I'm calling because Northwestern has received calls from several major donors questioning our decision to honor you with the Alumni Achievement Award. The board is meeting this afternoon to discuss the situation. Mary felt the familiar sensation of the ground shifting beneath her feet. After 6 months of vindication and success, the past was reaching out to drag her back into scandal and disgrace. I understand if the university needs to distance itself from me, Mary said quietly. Mary, I didn't call to distance Northwestern from you. I called to tell you that we're going to fight this. But I need you to be completely honest with me about your knowledge of your husband's activities. Mary took a deep breath. Dean Whitman, I knew nothing about Robert's illegal financial schemes. I was completely focused on my BMW responsibilities and trusted him to handle our family finances. When the German authorities investigated, they found no evidence of my involvement in his crimes. But I understand that people will always wonder if I should have known, should have asked more questions, should have been more suspicious. And what would you say to those people? Mary thought of Michael, now thriving in his sophomore year at Northwestern, of John Davis and the employees at Davis & Associates, whose lives had been improved by the success of their international partnerships, of the hundreds of executives who had changed how they approached talent recognition after hearing her speak. I would say that I've spent 6 years proving who I really am through my actions, my competence and my integrity. Anyone who wants to judge me based on my husband's crimes is free to do so. But I won't let their judgment stop me from using my abilities to create value for the people and organizations that believe in me. After ending the call with Dean Whitman, Mary sat in her office looking out at the Chicago skyline, processing the reality that her greatest professional test was still ahead of her. Just when she had thought the transformation was complete, she was being forced to defend not just her competence, but her character. Her assistant knocked on the door. Ms. Johnson, John Davis would like to see you in the main conference room. Mary walked down the hallway, wondering if she was about to face another crossroads moment where her entire future would depend on how other people chose to perceive her. In the conference room, she found not just John Davis but Hans and Klaus Miller, who had apparently flown from Munich on short notice. The Wall Street Journal was spread on the conference table, along with several other business publications that had picked up the story. John Davis stood as she entered. Mary, we need to talk about this article and its implications for our partnership. Mary braced herself for what felt like an inevitable conversation about protecting the company from association with scandal. Hans Miller spoke first, his voice grave, but not hostile. Ms. Johnson, Klaus and I flew here as soon as we saw the article. The accusations being raised about your knowledge of your husband's activities are serious. I understand, Herr Müller. If the Müller Group needs to reconsider our partnership to protect your reputation, Klaus interrupted. Mary, you misunderstand why we're here. Mary looked confused. Klaus continued. We're not here to distance ourselves from you. We're here to offer our complete support and to make a public statement about our confidence in your integrity and competence. Mary felt tears gathering in her eyes. Hans Müller opened his briefcase and pulled out a prepared statement. We've drafted a press release that will be distributed to all major business publications. It details our investigation into these allegations, our confidence in your character, and our expanded partnership with Davis & Associates based on your proven capabilities. John Davis smiled. Mary, we've also received calls from 12 other companies asking whether we're concerned about the scandal. Every single one of those calls ended with them asking for consulting opportunities with you. Klaus added, the business community isn't questioning your competence, Mary. They're questioning the motives of people who try to destroy someone's reputation based on their spouse's crimes. Mary sat down heavily in her chair, overwhelmed by this unexpected support. John Davis continued, Mary, you've spent 6 years proving who you are through your actions. Anyone who works with you, anyone who sees the value you create, anyone who witnesses your integrity in business dealings, they know exactly who you are. Hans Müller leaned forward. Ms. Johnson, in German business culture, we have a saying, judge people by their fruits, not by their roots. Your fruits, your professional accomplishments, your ethical standards, your impact on the organizations you work with, speak louder than any scandal from your past. Mary wiped tears from her eyes. Thank you, all of you. I don't know what to say. Klaus smiled. Say you're ready to fight back. We've scheduled a joint press conference for tomorrow morning. You, John, my father, and me, presenting a united front about the value of judging people based on their demonstrated competence rather than their personal circumstances. Mary looked around the conference room at these business leaders who had chosen to stand with her rather than distance themselves from potential controversy. She realized that this was perhaps the greatest validation of her transformation, not just that she had proven her competence, but that she had earned the trust and loyalty of people who were willing to defend her when she was under attack. I'm ready, Mary said firmly. Let's show the business world what it means to judge people by their character and capabilities, rather than by gossip and speculation. The ultimate test wasn't going to be about proving her innocence in her husband's crimes. That had already been established by the German authorities. The ultimate test was going to be about whether the business community would choose to focus on scandal or on substance, on past associations or on present accomplishments, on fear or on facts. Mary Johnson had faced this test before when she was a desperate cleaning lady asking executives to trust her with their most important business negotiation. She had passed that test through competence, integrity, and courage. Now she would face it again, this time with allies who believed in her and a track record of success that spoke for itself. The invisible woman had become impossible to ignore, and now she was about to prove that she was also impossible to destroy. Chicago Press Club. 1 year later. The press conference room was packed with journalists, business leaders, and camera crews from major news networks. Mary stood at the podium wearing a confident smile and a perfectly tailored business suit, flanked by John Davis, Hans Müller, and 3 other CEOs whose companies had become partners in what was now being called the Davis model of international business development. 12 months had passed since the Wall Street Journal article had attempted to destroy her reputation. Instead of ending her career, the controversy had sparked a national conversation about talent recognition, second chances, and the difference between character assassination and legitimate business criticism. Ladies and gentlemen, Mary began, her voice carrying clearly through the room's sound system, 1 year ago some people tried to define me by my husband's crimes and my lowest professional moment. Today, I want to share what happens when you choose to define yourself by your highest capabilities instead. She clicked to her first slide, showing a graph of Davis & Associates' revenue growth. The numbers were staggering. 400% increase in international contracts, expansion into 12 new countries, and recognition as the fastest-growing international consulting firm in the Midwest. The Davis model that we've developed is based on a simple premise. Exceptional people exist everywhere, but they're often hidden by circumstances, overlooked by conventional hiring practices, or underutilized because their current positions don't match their actual capabilities. Mary clicked to her next slide, showing case studies from companies that had implemented similar talent recognition programs. In the past year, organizations using our hidden asset assessment methodology have identified over 3,000 employees whose capabilities far exceeded their current job functions. The result has been an average 35% increase in productivity, 50% reduction in hiring costs, and unprecedented levels of employee engagement and retention. A journalist from Business Week raised her hand. Ms. Johnson, critics argue that your story is an anomaly, that most janitors don't have BMW executive experience. How do you respond to the suggestion that your success isn't replicable? Mary smiled. That's exactly the wrong question. The right question is, how many people in entry-level positions have capabilities that their employers have never bothered to discover? How many receptionists have advanced degrees? How many maintenance workers have technical certifications? How many part-time employees have specialized expertise that could transform departments if anyone took the time to ask? She clicked to a slide showing statistical data about underemployment in America. Current Department of Labor statistics show that 43% of American college graduates are working in positions that don't require their degree level. That's not an anomaly. That's a systematic failure to match human potential with organizational needs. John Davis stepped to the microphone. I want to add something personal to Mary's presentation. A year ago, Davis & Associates was a regional firm struggling to compete with larger companies. Today, we're an international consulting powerhouse, and it's not because we hired expensive experts or acquired smaller companies. It's because we learned to see the potential in someone we had completely overlooked. Hans Müller took the microphone next, speaking in his accented but perfect English. The Müller Group has operated in international markets for 70 years. We've worked with consulting firms from New York, London, Frankfurt, and Tokyo. Mary Johnson is the most strategically brilliant business consultant we have ever encountered, and we discovered her because she had the courage to reveal her true capabilities when the moment demanded it. A reporter from the Chicago Tribune asked, "Mr. Davis, how has your company's culture changed since implementing the Davis model?" John Davis looked at Mary, then back at the audience. "We've learned that titles and job descriptions are often completely irrelevant to actual capability. Our current Director of Technology Innovation was our former night security guard. He has a master's degree in computer science, but couldn't find tech work due to age discrimination. Our new Director of Client Relations was our former administrative assistant. She speaks 5 languages and has a degree in international communications." Mary retook the microphone. "But I want to address the personal attacks I faced last year, because they represent exactly the kind of thinking that keeps organizations from recognizing hidden talent." The room fell silent, cameras focusing on Mary as she prepared to address the controversy that had threatened to derail her career. When that Wall Street Journal article suggested that I should be judged by my husband's crimes, it was asking you to ignore evidence of my competence in favor of speculation about my character. When anonymous sources questioned my qualifications, they were asking you to focus on scandal rather than results. Mary's voice grew stronger. The business world faces a choice. We can continue to make hiring and promotion decisions based on appearances, connections, and gossip, or we can start making those decisions based on demonstrated competence and proven results. She clicked to her final slide. 1 year later, the numbers don't lie. The slide showed comprehensive data on Davis & Associates' success, client satisfaction ratings, and employee advancement statistics. The evidence of Mary's impact was overwhelming and undeniable. Today, I'm announcing the launch of the Hidden Assets Institute, a non-profit organization dedicated to helping companies identify and develop overlooked talent within their existing workforce. We'll be partnering with major universities and corporations to create assessment tools, training programs, and advancement opportunities for people whose potential has been systematically ignored. The applause was immediate and sustained. A reporter from CNN asked, "Ms. Johnson, what would you say to other people who feel invisible in their current positions, who have capabilities that aren't being recognized?" Mary paused, thinking of her own journey from invisible cleaning lady to internationally recognized business strategist. "I would say that competence doesn't disappear when it's not acknowledged. Your capabilities don't diminish when they're not immediately recognized. The challenge is to maintain your expertise and your confidence until the moment arrives when you can demonstrate your true value." She looked directly into the cameras. "But more importantly, I would challenge every leader watching this to ask yourself, who in your organization might be the next Mary Johnson? Who might be quietly possessing exactly the expertise you need, waiting for someone wise enough to recognize their potential?" As the press conference ended and reporters scattered to file their stories, Mary was surrounded by executives seeking consulting arrangements, university administrators proposing partnerships, and journalists requesting follow-up interviews. But the moment that mattered most came when Michael approached the podium, now a confident junior at Northwestern University, majoring in international business. "Mum," he said, giving her a hug, "I'm proud of you for more than just the success. I'm proud of you for proving that the person people overlook might be exactly the person they need most." Mary looked around the room at the business leaders, journalists, and academics who had come to hear her story. A year ago, she had been afraid that her past would define her future. Instead, she had redefined what it meant to transform limitations into opportunities, obstacles into advantages, and invisibility into influence. The invisible woman had not only found her voice, she had used it to change how an entire business community thought about recognizing and developing human potential. She had proven that sometimes the most unlikely person is exactly the right person, that competence matters more than circumstances, and that second chances can lead to first-class success when given to people with first-rate capabilities. The transformation was complete, but the impact would continue for years as organizations across America began implementing the lesson Mary Johnson had taught them. Never underestimate the person everyone else overlooks, because they might just be the person who changes everything. As Mary left the press conference that day, she carried with her the satisfaction of knowing that her story had become more than personal vindication. It had become a catalyst for changing how business leaders recognize talent, develop potential, and create opportunities for people whose capabilities have been hidden in plain sight. The cleaning lady had become an executive, but more importantly, the invisible had become impossible to ignore, and the underestimated had become indispensable. In a world where potential is often overlooked and competence frequently undervalued, Mary Johnson had proven that sometimes the most transformative change comes from the most unexpected sources. The story was complete, but the revolution in how organizations see and value human potential was just beginning.